Hello, everyone. My name is Natalie, and this is my inquiry project, Assessing for Success, Enhancing First-Year Undergraduate Learning. The project was on formative assessments and how they can aid first-year undergraduate students on their learning journey. Naturally, this is my inquiry question. How can the formative use of quiz assessments be utilized to facilitate long-term learning retention in first-year UBC undergraduates taking knowledge-based courses? First-year undergraduates are often the most vulnerable to educational setbacks, as the brand new transition from high school to university can be difficult. And like any other year, they will have to cultivate good study habits and take many exams. In my experience, I found that the short-term nature of test evaluations encouraged cramming. They pushed students to focus on retaining knowledge for the short term, just until the big test, and did not incentivize retaining that information long-term. So I wanted to find out how test assessments could be used in the students' favor, and perhaps decrease the times they study last minute into the depths of night. I began with understanding formative assessments and their benefits and how they differed from summative assessments. I then aimed to compare and contrast the practical nuances between quizzes and take-home assignments, and the positive effects quizzes could have on students' participation and learning retention. Finally, I integrated all that I learned to provide 2 ways which formative assessments may be used in an educational setting. Before delving into my project, I have a quick detour. In approaching this, I made a personal distinction between knowledge-based and application-based courses. For example, a standard math course versus a psychology course. The former is application-based. It requires the student to be able to understand and apply a handful of formulas to different problems in order to solve them. These formulas may be memorized, but a formula sheet is usually given during the exam. A psychology course would be knowledge-based. It requires the memorization and retention of large amounts of information and to later use that information and knowledge to answer questions. So learning retention is very important here. In first year, knowledge-based courses are also the most common, hence my focus upon it. Next, I'll talk briefly about summative assessments before getting into formative assessments. Summative assessments have long been considered the traditional means for measuring student achievement. Think midterms and finals. While they offer definite measures of performance and communicate criteria for success, they have their drawbacks. Summative assessments often fall short in promoting student engagement and fail to actively contribute to the development of a student's understanding of course material. A major reason is because they are designed to evaluate student learning at the end of a unit, and rather than assess student learning during the learning process. Further, the high-stakes nature and the ambitious breadth of summative assessments may impede the student's learning journey. Summative assessments tend to be weighted heavily in a student's final grade, as a single assessment can cover many units. This achieves breadth, but fails to assess student depth of learning. This leads to incomplete feedback for the student. Research by Myers and Myers indicates that the traditional model of summative assessment, such as hour-long exams every 2 months, is less effective than biweekly exams. Their results showed that student learning retention and evaluations were notably better, with averages higher by 10% for students engaged in shorter exams. This suggests that breaking down a large exam into consistent evaluations over the semester yields more favorable learning outcomes. Now we turn fully to formative assessments, which are a powerful tool for fostering student success. Formative assessments open a dialogue between students and teachers. They allow the teacher to provide consistent feedback and help facilitate academic integration as first-year students are given time and aid to acclimate to new study demands in their transition from high school to university. And formative assessments are characterized by their low-stakes nature. They allow students to develop an accurate perception of their abilities without pressure that the consequences of poor performance can bring. However, there is an emphasis on low stakes, not no stakes. A study by Ryan and Hems found that almost all student participants handed in their quizzes when there were points available to be earned, and few did so when they weren't. This showed that students are more likely to participate when there are tangible consequences attached. This highlights the importance of marking formative assessments and assigning them course grade consequences. 2 forms of formative assessments are quizzes and take-home assignments. But is there a difference in utilizing one format over the other? Orchard found that both formats, multiple choice quiz and written assignments, generated high student participation and were relevant to students' final course grades. Ultimately, engagement with the formative assignment was more important than whether the assignment was written or multiple choice. Thus, the choice of one over the other comes down to practical considerations. Assignments, while valuable, are resource-intensive and suffer from delayed feedback. Time is required to create new problem sets each semester, and altogether they can take weeks to mark. In larger class sizes, common for first-year undergraduate students, this challenge compounds. Grades can feel like they're taking forever to come back. On the other hand, online quizzes are more resource efficient as they rely on reusable, pre-generated test banks. The immediacy of their results allow for timely feedback. Though simpler in nature, the swiftness of feedback allows the educator to react early if significant knowledge gaps in a certain topic are revealed. If the class collectively scores low on a group of questions, it suggests to the educator that learning in the area was inadequate and more attention on the topic is needed. Considering these insights, quizzes emerge as the preferred choice. Then what are the specific benefits of quizzes? Research by Johnson and Kiviniemi found that the integration of regularly scheduled quizzes focused on reading material are a powerful tool against the common problem of last-minute cramming. The regular nature of the quizzes forced the student to study more consistently and often. Thus, they discouraged the students from postponing study of course material until the day before an exam. The efficacy of this method is rooted in the cognitive science of learning. Karpik and Roediger found that students absorb and retain new material more effectively during repeated study and self-testing. There was a notable improvement in learning retention even a week later. Further, research by Ross and Escartelli found that the positive impact extends to performance on course exams too. Students who participated in quizzes covering specific content areas exhibited significantly better performance on related exam questions. This correlation underscores the idea that the frequency of quizzes encourages students to repeatedly retrieve information from their memory throughout the semester. Notably, when concepts build upon each other, each successful retrieval, when distributed across days, helps to pave the neural pathways involved in recalling information. This contributes to strengthening long-term learning retention. Circling back to my inquiry question, how can the formative use of quiz assessments be utilized to facilitate long-term learning retention in first-year UBC undergraduates taking knowledge-based courses? Overall, the findings of my inquiry project suggest two ways to answer that question. First, teachers can consider using the summative assessment format with a formative influence in a way that will provide consistent lower-stakes feedback. If feasible, this can be done through adopting a bi-weekly exam approach instead of traditional bi-monthly exams. These bi-weekly exams can be done online to circumvent potential scheduling and teaching resource allocation issues. A similar approach has been shown to contribute to higher letter grades, increase student engagement, and improve learning retention. The regular nature of these exams should also force students to consistently study course material, which will discourage cramming and foster a robust foundation for positive long-term learning outcomes. If a bi-weekly exam approach is not feasible within the class structure, then the teachers may use formative assessments as a support to summative assessments. This approach follows the same principles and findings as the first suggestion. Specifically, maintain the traditional testing format and schedule regular low-stakes online quizzes for reading or lecture material. These quizzes could take place at the end of a lecture or at the end of a chapter, so that students can take the material more closely. This approach still promotes a distributed approach to learning, and the usage of test banks will streamline the process. The instructor can also then identify potential knowledge gaps via low test scores and help improve them prior to a heavyweight summative assessment. For students who do not wish to improve, this will allow them to objectively evaluate where they may need to study more, based on the questions or quizzes they score poorly on. Okay, so as we're near the end, I have a few more doodles I haven't managed to fit in. So I'll just show them as I get into my reflection. Before getting into this project, I had some preconceived notions. I had assumed that a writing or written assignment would be a better predictor of performance than multiple choice quizzes. Writing takes more cognitive resources, and writing assignments tend to be more open-ended in nature, thus requiring some deeper levels of reflection, student deliberation, etc. I suppose my thinking was influenced by my own experience, as I've always had more trouble with written assignments. I kind of assumed that the trouble I went through with them would benefit me more, and perhaps in hindsight, it did, but only because I was indirectly driven to study harder due to the perceived difficulty. Further, I like that a consistent schedule of quizzes spread across the semester indeed led to improved student performance, as compared to bi-monthly heavier midterms or exams. Last year, I'd taken a course that gave bi-weekly quizzes over the semester instead of midterms. In being forced to study every 2 weeks, I had to stay on top of the material and could not leave the content until last minute, or I risked being overwhelmed. My grades in that class ended up far better than all my other classes that semester, and I hope that is the same for other students. So, in the end, I did have the hypothesis in my mind towards the ending, and to have it now supported by research is quite satisfying. Thank you for listening.